Today, we're going to be talking about one of the coolest and most badass topics in history: piracy. No, not the time that you illegally downloaded Horse and Die at 3 am on Tuesday. I can assure you, there is nothing cool or badass about that. We're actually talking about these pirates, the swashbuckling criminals who roamed the seas during the 16 and 1700s, forever memorialized in one of the biggest film franchises of all time, and in every last-minute Halloween costume. Pirates are famous all over the world. But just like Santa or the Easter Bunny, pirates aren't real. Wait, hold on, that's not right. Pirates are real. Don't know where that came from. But the real-life pirates were a lot different than the pirates you see in movies. And so, without further ado, let's talk about the life of an average pirate and how it wasn't as good as you may think it was. Now, pirates have been a thing pretty much ever since we invented boats and ships. I mean, humans have been stealing shit on land for years at this point, so it was only a matter of time until someone went, "Wait a minute, that boat's got a lot of very expensive and valuable stuff on it, and they don't have any security at all guarding it. If only there was a way to rob something that's in the ocean instead of on land. Hey, you wanna buy a boat?" And so, the art of piracy was born. Now, although there were pirates all across the world, the ones that most of us are familiar with are the ones that roamed the oceans during the 16 and 1700s, which is known as the Golden Age of Piracy. At the time, Europe was busy doing its colonization stuff, and this involved transporting a lot of very valuable resources across thousands of miles of ocean. And contrary to popular belief, the ocean is not a very populated place. So any ship that was making this long journey was pretty much on its own with no one else to help out in case there was any danger, which was pretty scary for the ship, but fucking amazing for the pirates. Pirates during this time had three main areas where they got most of their loot from: the Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic. And they constantly battled with the navies and armies of the European countries while they plundered as many ships as they could. Another reason why there were so many pirates during this time was because of the navies themselves. Every colonial power was focused on expanding their navy so that they could take over more land. And so, they hired and trained more and more sailors and captains to sail their ships. But some of these guys found it really hard to stay loyal to their country when there was the chance to make millions of dollars just right there in front of them. I mean, patriotism is cool and all, but it sure as hell doesn't pay the bills. So, since they already had experience in sailing, they just said fuck it and became pirates. Some other pirates, like this guy, had absolutely no experience in the ocean, but just wanted to join in on the fun and get more money. But regardless of where you came from, the ocean was always trying its hardest to fuck you over. And although you might be safer in a bigger boat, danger could still strike at any moment. Running a pirate ship, especially a big one, was no easy task, and every ship had a crew of several people just to keep the ship going. The average ship's crew consisted of what you'd normally expect. You had the captain, who ran the ship, the quartermaster, who was second in command and took over if the captain died, the second mate, who took over if the quartermaster died, the third mate, who took over if the second mate died. Yeah, dying was very common on these ships. You also had the gunners, the sailing masters, the surgeons, and the cooks. Pretty self-explanatory stuff. But most pirate ships found it hard to get a surgeon in the middle of the ocean, so this job was mostly done by whoever had the most medical knowledge. If they were lucky, it would be someone actually capable. If not, well, the job would go to the ship's carpenter. Actually saving your legs was off the table a long time ago, so at least now you got someone who can cut them off properly. If you were really unlucky and the ship's carpenter was busy, or they just didn't have one, which is not the best idea when you're on a wooden ship, the job then went to the cook. So the cutting off process is a lot more painful, but hey, at least you get a tasty meal afterwards. Some fancy pirate ships also had someone as the cabin boy. The cabin boy was usually the newest or youngest member of the ship, and his job was to basically be the captain's servant. He'd bring the captain food, deliver his messages, and work long hours. And since he was the newest member, all this counted as his training to become a pirate. Now, I'm not exactly sure how bringing the captain coffee every 5 minutes would make someone a better pirate, but I mean, if the guy's willing to do it, then I sure as hell ain't telling him no. And best of all, cabin boys weren't paid anything because they were learning. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is just an excuse to get a free servant. Another job on the ship that you definitely didn't want to find yourself in was the powder monkey. At the time, the cannons the pirates used weren't exactly that advanced, and they still had to be manually loaded and lit every time. This meant that the gunpowder had to be poured in after every shot, but the gunpowder was stored pretty far away from the actual cannons to prevent any accidental explosions. That's where the powder monkey comes in. His job was to bring gunpowder from the storage to the cannons, which doesn't sound all too bad, except for the fact that most of the time he had to do it in the middle of a battle, which I as far as carrying large amounts of explosives go, is not a very good place to be in. So clearly, this job is extremely dangerous, and so obviously, it automatically went to the newest or youngest member of the crew. Cause, getting your arms blown off, it's all part of the training process. So, as you can see, being a pirate, especially when you're new, is less about heroically fighting enemy ships and more about doing what everyone tells you to do and trying not to die. Now you might be wondering how pirate ships manage to get so many crew members to join them. I mean, you're telling me these guys convinced 20 whole people to throw their life away and live on a boat forever, meanwhile I can't get 3 of my friends to hang out at the same time? I must be doing something wrong here. Well, like a lot of things in life, the secret ingredient is kidnapping. Now most of the ship's crew were on the ship willingly, but sometimes when the captain needed a few extra hands on deck, he'd just go on land and knock someone out, drag him out of the ship. Before you know it, he's waking up in the middle of the ocean starting his new life as a pirate. This practice was pretty common during this time, and it was really effective, probably due to the fact that you don't have a lot of options to escape when you're on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic with a bunch of unwashed men pointing guns at you. In fact, the practice was so common that it wasn't actually illegal, and was actually done by the Navy themselves when they were short on people. But eventually they stopped doing this, after they realized that giving a complicated and expensive battleship to the first drunk guy they found on the streets was not exactly the best idea. Now becoming a pirate sounds like a pretty tough process, but at least it gets better once you're part of the crew, right? Well, you might be getting treated well by the other pirates on the ship, but Mother Nature is still trying its very best to absolutely fuck you over. For starters, the ships weren't always in the best condition. Water was a scarce resource on a pirate ship, and they couldn't afford to waste it on unnecessary things like sanitation and hygiene. And don't even think of using ocean water to clean the ship because salt water can actually damage the wood the ship's made out of. Bathing was also out of the question for similar reasons, so as you can probably tell, diseases were pretty common on pirate ships. One of the most common ones was dysentery, which causes extreme diarrhea, and if the person doesn't drink enough water, it can also be fatal. But that should be fine, right? I mean, if they weren't using water for bathing or cleaning, they must have a lot of it for drinking at least. Well, the thing about fresh water is that it's a pretty good environment for bacteria to grow, and on a ship that's rarely cleaned with an unwashed crew, those bacteria have a fucking field day. So the pirates instead got all of their hydration from another source. You ever wonder why pirates were so obsessed with rum? Well, apart from them wanting to get absolutely shit-faced, the main reason they drank so much of it was because it didn't spoil during their long sea journeys, so that they could actually have a source of hydration on the ship. So dysentery was a pretty common disease, but the real killer was scurvy. Fresh fruits like oranges and lemons couldn't be on the ship for long, for obvious reasons, and so most pirates had no source of vitamin C, often for months at a time. This caused their gums to start bleeding, their teeth to fall out, and if left untreated, could even cause death. In fact, it's estimated that around 50% of all sailors during this time died from scurvy. It's pretty ironic, isn't it? These guys were surrounded by ocean for months at a time, and they still couldn't find enough vitamin C. Yes, I'm very lonely. Another common disease was gangrene. If you ever got an injury on the ship, you better pray that it doesn't get infected, because on a ship like this, well, let's just say there's a reason why so many pirates have wooden legs. So even after you become a pirate, your life was still pretty shit. But what about the food, you might ask? I mean, if they were traveling all around the world, surely they'll be enjoying all kinds of exotic foods, right? Well, that was true when they were on land, but ships usually don't do that a lot, unless something is very wrong with them. When they were in the ocean, they couldn't have any fresh food on board, and so they stocked up on food that could survive for months. And common pirate food was something called hardtack. It was basically like crackers, except baked a bunch of times to make sure it doesn't spoil. The result is a food source that stays edible for months. Keyword there being edible, because while you could technically eat hardtack, it wasn't a very pleasant experience. As the name suggests, it was hard as a brick, and it didn't taste that great either, especially after you've eaten it every day for the past 6 months. And in case that didn't put you off enough, these hardtacks were usually infested with little bugs. But since it was too much of an effort to take them out, most pirates just ate the whole thing altogether. Another common pirate food was dried meat. No, not like beef jerky dried meat, more like left in the sun for 8 years until it becomes a fossil dried meat. Yeah, after eating all this, I wouldn't be surprised if they had bleeding gums even without the scurvy. So, after getting kidnapped and waking up in the middle of the ocean, trying not to get yourself blown up on your first day, and having dysentery, scurvy, and a whole bunch of other shit that I don't even want to get into, you couldn't even sit down and enjoy a nice hot meal. Who would have thought being an international criminal would be this hard? So yeah, that was the miserable and suffering-filled life of the average pirate. The stuff they tend to gloss over in most movies, for good reason. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, and watch another video by clicking right here. I'll see you guys later.
I got bad